What up? What up? Welcome to Believe in Rams, presented by FanDuel. We've got a lot to get to on the show today. The Rams have been busy. It is NFL owners' meetings right now in Phoenix. Some interesting stuff is coming out. But before we get into that, let's talk to Cynthia Frelund. One of the things that I love that you do is you take data, you translate it for us regular people, and help signal what we think the future is going to be. And there's a lot of questions that people have about the Rams this season. So let's get into it. Cyn, how are you doing? Thanks for hanging with us.
I'm great. This is the best time of year because every single team 1 to 32 has a bunch of hope. And while it's not necessarily like a great investment thesis hope, I do think the Rams could invest in the hope that they've created with all of their moves so far. And we haven't even gotten to the draft, which obviously, maybe they don't love picks as much as some other teams, but we haven't even gotten there yet. And there's already a lot of real hope that the Rams fans can invest in.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that's really interesting too is if you just go on and you take a look at the odds makers, you go on FanDuel Sportsbook, you see that the Rams are positioned at that top spot. I know we're we're weeks away from just the draft. We still have a ton of offseason to go. But based on Rams free agency moves, odds makers are already putting them at, Super Bowl winners, or at least the favorite to go back to the big game. So I think that's interesting. When you take a look at the Rams and the moves they've made during free agency, you and I kind of talked about it a little bit, but what do you think about what they've done so far in free agency?
Well, I love the Trent McDuffie move. If you go and watch the film on Trent McDuffie, the versatility, the way that he plays in different kind of circumstances is great. It's a huge fit. It's like, that was an area where the Rams needed to address. We saw it at the end of last season. Those deep passes, a lot of different types of passes were a problem. And with a front like the one that the Rams have, it shouldn't have looked like that on the back end. And now you add Trent McDuffie and then sneaky add Jalen Watson, who was his teammate, which means that learning curve of working together, establishing chemistry, all of the things that take some time. Usually we see like the month of September is kind of where all the teams kind of come together and defenses sort of start to look like the ones that we see post Thanksgiving. Well, now you've shortened that learning curve by a significant amount. And by the way, re-signing Cam Curl, brilliant move as well. Sometimes the best moves are keeping your own guys. And that was reinforced by adding 2 really nice pieces, like very, very, like really nice is an understatement. Great pieces from the Chiefs, which clearly have that Super Bowl pedigree.
And they've done it before. They did it with Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. They were like, okay, let's take these 2 guys that may, be familiar with each other. That's so right. That their transition, I remember when I was talking to Marshall Faulk, he's like, it's a no-brainer that they're doing that by design, because getting a buddy, having somebody with you to sort of go through the experiences together, you're familiar with each other, like lends the transition into the pros. I'm speaking about Fisk and Jared Verse. It's a softer landing. And even though, to me, the top 2 coaches in the NFL are Andy Reid and Sean McVay, in my opinion. So you're getting 2 guys coached by Andy Reid now into the Sean McVay system. And the thing that happened last season with the Rams, I'm curious to get your take with why the secondary may have struggled, because, the big talking point about the Rams secondary and their defense was, I want to say the second least expensive salary, among the defense. So they got these guys for less expensive, and they thought they could kind of groom them and fix them. They've obviously made a ton of changes, not just in the defense, but their defensive backs coach. They have a completely, not a new offensive situation with Cliff Kingsbury, and they've made some changes there. But why do you think the defense struggled, or did you see anything like stand out to you in terms of why the defense may have struggled last season?
Well, you bring up a good point there about where you're spending your resources. It's not always linear where you're spending is the best, because there's always rookie pay scales, et cetera. But you do have to make sacrifices. That's, to me, the best part about the NFL, because my sacrifices have to be like, okay, like I can live with this flaw. We have a cap, we have a floor. Like I have to fit it between these 2 margins. So when you're looking at the opportunity to succeed, you just have to make sure that you can live with your flaws. Unfortunately, those flaws were ones where if you're playing with the lead, teams are going to throw on you and et cetera. And it's just reinforced something that was not able to be overcome at the end. Not to say that it wasn't a really good strategy for the majority of the season. I mean, the NFC West is last year and probably this year too. We have one team that's rebuilding, but other than that, those three teams are very much in the running. Last year, of course, the Seahawks won, and this year again, they forecast to be very good. So it's just about being able to overcome the things that you saw the Seahawks. They had to, part ways with many of their playmakers. You just can't afford everyone. So that was the strategy the Rams took last year. This year they reload, configured things a little bit different, and addressed some problems. So it's all about how you address your problems. Some do it through the draft, some do it through free agency. The Rams did it through free agency. So I think, and I know you're going to ask me a question about Matthew Stafford. You tipped me off earlier, so I'm holding my tongue about that. But when you ask it, you'll see how the defense works with the offense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the thing, and just we'll go right into it. I think the thing that's the most interesting about the Rams, and certainly it was last year, but now we're seeing it even more concrete and acute, is that this is a team that is trying to prepare for the future, but also plan for the present. So they have to not put all their chips in, because like how might that impact the team moving forward in the next 2-3 years? But also, even one of the things that came out of the NFL owners meetings was that Sean McVay admitted that, there was potential trade talks about moving on or shifting Davante Adams to another team, which that was something that was discussed, a few weeks ago. So the thing that I love the most about this time of year is why these moves are getting made. What does it signal? And you're essentially like an architect of not only just talent, but character development and who works in the team, who doesn't. And, so Matthew Stafford, let's talk about it, because, they have to figure out how to win with him in this very tight window. Is he going to come back next season? I mean, obviously he was very adamant. He was coming back right away with the MVP, announcement. But the Rams have a very, prickly situation on their hands. Who is going to be the Matthew Stafford of the future? When is that going to happen? So when you think about that, Sin, like, where does your mind go, and how do you rationalize all of these decisions that the Rams are making?
So first off, there isn't a lot of data on players who play for 17 seasons, because not a lot of people make it that long. You have to be really good in order to, and stay pretty healthy in order to make that happen. There's always going to be tiny numbers with that. But when you're trying to figure out this like version of how do we plan for the future, but also plan for now, but the future, all these things together, being smart about listening to trade offers, whether or not you take them, you have to listen, right? If somebody calls you, I don't care who you are, just listen, because it gives you a sense of what the market is and where the market stands. Now, I'm sure that if a team would have offered like the Jalen Waddle trade, like a 1, a 3 and swapping 4s for Davante Adams, but you're going to think about it, man. You have to figure those things out as they come. So it's not disloyal. I don't speak English. It's not loyal to listen.
Totally.
It doesn't mean anything. This is a business. So number one, like, listening is smart, but then making the best decision for your team. So the best decision for the team clearly was to keep Davante Adams, run it back this year with Puka and Davante, and then be able to orchestrate the midseason. Are we going to play a bunch of 13? Are we going to be crazy in the red zone? Are we going to, all those different switches that we saw Sean McVay make, those levers that you can pull. He has all of his tricks up his sleeve that he can still use. So you should always listen, but make the best decisions given what's actually in front of you. So
totally.
I think that's life, right? But it's also in football, like, so people are like, I can't believe they're even listening to, no. You have to listen. Like, doesn't mean you have to take it, but you need to listen. So I'm looking at that. And then I'm looking at Matthew Stafford and saying, if he, last year ahead of the season, everyone was like, back, that's scary. And look at the season that they had. So I believe him when he says that he feels like he can play. I don't think he's not a known like fibber, right? Like, I say some coaches are like, I say Kyle Shanahan's a lying liar who lies, because he'll be like, I don't know if we're all going to be here Sunday, right? Like, he tells us the very smallest amount we need to know. I feel like Matthew Stafford's quite transparent with if he says he's going to play, we have to believe him. And I have said, you can see this jersey behind me. It's a guy he used to throw the ball to a lot. I've said Matthew Stafford on record. I'll say it again. He's the most underrated first ballot Hall of Famer that we'll ever have. Like nobody, like people for some reason they underestimate it. I have no idea why, but I maintain that, he'll find a way to make it happen. I think, sometimes seeing him rush for like, as you see him run, you're like, please don't, like, it's not your style, man. But, he'll still do it. It's, 16, 17 years in, we're like, what's going on? But my point is, if he says it, we believe it. And then they craft the team around it. I just don't think that they're being obtuse in any way.
Yeah, but you make a great point. There's not a lot of data to suggest what we know is going to come out of Matthew Stafford, because not a lot of players have won MVP at 37, now 38. I think he turned 38 during the Super Bowl. And largely the offense is mostly coming back. And, I think when it comes to trying to plan for the future, you've got Sean McVay, you've got Matthew Stafford, you got Davante Adams, and you have a decent, pretty good, running back core. We haven't seen a lot from Jarquez Hunter making an appearance, but they do tend to hold their rookies. Like we didn't see a lot of Blake Corum the year before when he was a rookie. So they're patient when it comes to giving guys playing time. But when you see this offense, like, do you see this offensive identity at all shifting? Like, we've got to have some regression at this point because they're the number one offense. Matthew Stafford, is he going to like have another MVP campaign? What are the numbers saying?
Well, let's not burden him with having to be an MVP again, because like that in general, that doesn't happen. So let's just say like, and then when we talk about regression, to me, part of that means like you're outperforming based on what your range is. And I thought we saw a lot of range last year when, there was that time where it was all 13, right?
Yeah.
When the Davante Adams got hurt, they switched things around again. So when you're do I expect Davante Adams to set another record for catching touchdown passes of tiny air yards? No, absolutely not. But I do expect those types of catches to still be really influential. To me, remember, it's not necessarily like regression can be like if you're being the MVP or you're setting a record, something like it can come down to here, maybe not record setting, but still something that's really important to what your identity is. And I think their identity will largely remain the same, which is Sean McVay will try to exploit certain defensive tendencies with the things that we've seen. The problem is he's really good at it, so he doesn't have to necessarily wholesale change. Let's look at the Chiefs, for example. Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes coming back from an ACL. They went out and got Kenneth Walker. You're going to see a lot more gap schemes than we did when we have recently, right? They didn't have a running back that could do that. So to me, that's a difference because of personnel. When you have similar personnel and all of the tricks are working, like Tyler Higbee being re-signed is a big deal. Again, keeping your same players, it may not be the splashy, sexy free agency frenzy, but it is really important to your team. So getting those pieces back to make a 13 look like 11 or 11 look like 13 or however you want to say it, right? To make that happen, he still has all those pieces and they're not failing yet. So there was no wholesale change that would lead me to believe that they're going to change their identity in a large way because they're already good at being a chameleon.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think the biggest issue when it comes to shifting schematically based on defensive tendencies, I would say the biggest issue, or, maybe Sean McVay's thorn in his side, is the Seahawks. So when you have to see the Seahawks twice a year, how does Sean McVay adapt, adjust, or what can he do this year that he wasn't able to, I guess, see, that couldn't get 2 wins against the Seahawks, both on the road, one in the NFC Championship game and one was I think week 13 or something.
Well, the good news is the Seahawks are not bringing back some of those pieces that were a problem. Like throw it where Rick Woolen isn't, because he's now across the country. So, I think that part of it is that now that you're starting to see them, they had to make decisions, right? They had to make hard decisions. Of course, they still have Nick Imanwari, who's super versatile. He's a safety, but didn't really play safety, right? But it's like Josh Jobe, then they have a lot of pieces that are gone. And I think that will, number one, that will help them, because to be able to say you can draft to get back all of these pieces, you lost an edge rusher, you lost this. No, I think a lot of it, and it's not like the Rams were like blown out, right? Like it was, they play each other closely. All of these NFC West guys play each other closely, like every time. It's almost like you might as well like roll a dice and see what happens. So ultimately, I think that will be an advantage going forward now that they don't have those rookies on the rookie pay scale. They're elsewhere. So, I mean, just by virtue of that. And number two, you have a number of looks at how Mike Macdonald now wants to run the defensive minded head coach, very Ravens-like scheme. We know where he comes from, et cetera. So now he can, once you get more of a sample size, it's not like the Rams play the Ravens very often. So you're not getting a lot of those head-to-head situations where you have to deal with a defense that looks like that. So now that there's more data points, the regression will hit you in the good way here, meaning you'll be able to recognize patterns and tendencies quicker, and therefore be able to have a solution for them in shorter order.
Your predictive model is pretty spot on. Did you see Sam Darnold on your bingo card to like be in the Super Bowl? Did you at all predict that the Seahawks were going to be like the Seahawks this last season?
I thought that the Seahawks would be better than, I had them going over their win total, which was decently high. I think it was like 8.5 or like 9.5. I don't think anyone had Sam Darnold. Well, maybe Sam's mom had him going to the Super Bowl in year one with the Seahawks. Right. The NFC West in general was going to beat each other up. So that's kind of a fear that you always have, right? Getting the bye becomes really important if you have a veteran quarterback, especially, and beating each other up just makes things a lot harder. So it's going to me, remain the same this year in that division, especially some of the opponents. It's a tough schedule this year, but I thought that they'd be better than their number. I didn't have them going to the Super Bowl. I did start to like them more as the year progressed, and they did switch to my Super Bowl team. It's on record. You can see it. Switched to my Super Bowl team around, I want to say, like right after Halloween. So like November 5th, 6th, something like that.
Because what were you seeing at that point that you were like, okay, defense.
It was their defense. The fact that they could get such good pressure without having to blitz this year, especially, was massively important, because it's a pendulum, right? So, as we see a lot of people this year running to the inside was again good. Now we'll have to see outside zone rushing go back to be a thing because of where people are located. But if you can get pressure on opposing quarterback without having to blitz, you have an advantage in this league. And that will probably persist for quite some time, just because now you can get numbers. No one plays base defense anymore, and everyone's using like nickel, dime, all these defensive backs, but they're coming from different directions. And Nicky Manwari was he embodied that.
Yeah. Well, and even the dynamic, Milo, my dog, by the way, sometimes he just pretends he's a guard dog.
He's got a lot to protect, man. He's got to do it.
How are your dogs doing, by the way? You have two little fur babies, right?
My fur babies are great. This is shed season for us, because they're rescues, but they're huskies. So the weather turning is like, there's like white snow fur in my house. So it's constant vacuuming.
Somebody needs to get Cynthia a Roomba partnership. Yep. That'd be great. An endorsement for her huskies. We love our dogs. Well, no, and I think the thing that we saw, getting back to the Rams and the Seahawks, was when McVay tried the 13 personnel was leading up to that first game against the Seahawks. And when he tried to implement it, he did not really have success against Seattle in that first game. So he kind of had to shift the way he was sort of positioning this 13 personnel that really got brought up because Puka was unavailable. I forget. I think it was the Ravens game. He had got injured, and so that's when all this diversifying of 13 personnel ended up on the scene. But he didn't really have a lot of success against the Seahawks defense, and so that really started to entrench in my mind that I was like, okay, with or without Sam Darnold, this Seahawks team is legit. And, the Rams better figure it out next time they play them, because they're going to definitely find a way to meet them again in the postseason. And that's exactly what ended up happening.
I hate to say it, because Rams fans won't like to hear it, but I don't think it's the Seahawks that's the problem in the division this year, and it's not the Cardinals. So the healthy Niners now with freaking Mike Evans, to me, that's going to be fireworks. That now, as a fan watching, it's going to be fun to watch because whenever the schedule comes out, we get to see. I mean, one of them's in Australia, but like whenever we get to see what's going on, that's going to be fireworks. But it always is.
Yeah. Oh my God, Milo, come here now. See, this is why he needs to go in the other room. Milo, get over here. Yeah, Mike Evans.
He's supposed to be on camera.
That's right. He's a ham. It is what he is. Yeah, Mike Evans goes to San Francisco, and even with a banged up team, they managed to, take a win. So for Rams fans, I think they are actually very concerned about a healthy Niners team. When this team is operating on all cylinders, listen, the division is stacked, and
the winner of the Super Bowl, I would say, obviously it feels very likely that the participant to the Super Bowl from the NFC will come from the West. But if I were looking on, FanDuel, if I didn't work for the NFL, and could do these things, I would look on the FanDuel Sportsbook and say, I don't know, those NFC West teams, 3 of them are really that's who's going to win the Super Bowl. One of those.
Yeah. When you look at the draft, and I know we need to wrap things up. When you look, Milo, get over here. When you look at the draft, come here. A lot of hype, a lot of talk about, that 13 overall pick. Is it going to be wide receiver? Is it going to be a quarterback? There's talk about it being a quarterback. Who do you see as, if we can just talk quarterback first, is there a guy that, like, when I think about the next great era of quarterbacks for a Sean McVay, led offense, I think this guy's got to be smart. First and foremost, he's got to be smart. That playbook is so dense. I think that's why they brought back Tyler Higbee, because they're like, we can't draft another tight end and think that this tight end is going to understand his system. We'd rather keep somebody a bit more veteran who understands, who might help the development of a young Terrence Ferguson. So when I think of quarterbacks, the next guy has to almost there was talk about Joe Burrow. Do you feel like the Rams are going to target a QB in the draft? And if so, what are you thinking this guy has to be in order to fit a Sean McVay system?
So I think that this is an interesting draft for quarterbacks that aren't named Fernando Mendoza, because it feels like there's going to be guys at in the later picks of the draft that could be prototypes that would make sense to develop. Right. So I don't, it was interesting because on these, because the perception around the draft is that it's so light at the quarterback position, I don't know as much about their personalities as I have in past seasons. I can watch their film. I can look and see how they do in a press conference, but I don't know. How did they perform in meetings? Did they go in meetings? Were they meeting at the combine? Were they asked to come, sit down in these meetings? Or is this something that they're relying on their scouts to be like, bring him in, we'll take a flyer? I'm not sure. But, I think it's very interesting. Like some of these names that Carson Beck's super polarizing, the Miami quarterback, right? Some people love him, some people hate him. And I'm like, well, I watched this film. What do you love or hate? And it's like, well, blah, blah, blah. It's not the stuff we normally hear, right? Like usually you're like, oh, accuracy, blah, blah, blah. Or, he doesn't handle pressure where he takes too many sacks, something like that. But it's not those traits this year. That's not what they're talking about. They'll talk about, well, I don't like how he handles this pressure. And you're like, okay, but can you get past that? Is that something that you believe you can, teach out of him, especially if he's not expected? So this is I feel like we're going to get a quarterback or two unexpected. So maybe not, we expect Fernando Mendoza to be good. He will have a lot to live up to, but that aside, I think we'll get 1 or 2 out of this that are going to surprise us, much in the way like a Jacoby Brissett surprised us coming out of NC State. People are like, I don't know what to think of this kid. And now he does really well wherever he goes. So I'm not necessarily thinking we're finding the next Tom Brady. I don't necessarily think that, but I do think we'll see some guys who have these quality attributes that we didn't necessarily know, because a lot of the stuff is like their ability to learn I hate, I'm going on a diatribe here, but I hate the transfer portal. NIL is what it is. The player should be played, but it used to be too punitive to transfer. Now it is too easy, and it's making playbooks this thin. So when you're looking at these quarterbacks that are coming out of college, it's like, well, he spent 1 year here, had a cup of coffee here. He did this, he did this, he did this. And some scouts are like, well, now we know how they act with money. Okay. But do we know how they act, I don't know, under center, like to be a pulling guard. I'll wait. So it has some adverse consequences to keep having these people move all the time because they're not really learning depth of playbooks. So how they learn thus becomes such an important characteristic. And that's not something as outsiders that we really have any way to judge because we're not seeing their evolution over even 2 years. A lot of places they're jumping around a lot.
And that makes so much.
I hate the transfer portal. Just kidding.
Yeah, no. And that, by the way, that makes so much sense. We think that it's an advantage to the player, but in a lot of ways it could disrupt their ecosystem and how they develop, how they learn, thereby.
Older, right? So some of these positions, they're older, like wide receiver, you're taking a pay cut to come to the NFL in many ways. So now you're older, you're like your muscles, like I don't know how it's going to transform the way the data works. And I just don't like it for quarterbacks because I want to know how they learn more. And I don't know how to measure that as an outsider.
Wow, that is something I never thought of before. And it's so interesting. And this is why we need Cynthia Frelund around all the time to dissect and translate the data into sort of how this impacts and affects the NFL. Because you're right. If we start seeing a drop off in development, could it be a part of their inability to learn long term because they just didn't get the experience in college because they're moving all over the place? You know what I mean? Cynthia Frelund, always the best. Okay. I stalked all of your socials. What are you up to? What can people check out when they want to, sort of invest in what I think is very interesting, taking data and sort of translating it into the world of the NFL, which is what you do so well. Thank you.
So Path to the Draft on NFL Network starts today, or it starts Monday, the 30th, and then continues actually after the draft because the Path to the Draft also continues after. Don't worry about the title. And then we have that. And then Numbers Game, which is on YouTube. It's at Numbers Game Media. That's kind of a little deeper dive into specific numbers. So we'll be going into numbers around each team. We're going to take a little detour next week and talk Masters numbers because I love golf as well. Golf, the tournament. There's a few things that we take detours in, but mainly it will be about the draft. Same with NFL IQ, which I do with Logan Ryan, former 2-time winning Super Bowl cornerback.
Love all of that. That is my favorite. I love dissecting sort of the layers in between what we actually see in the game. Go check out all those things. Cynthia Frelund, Path to the Draft is coming up. And the draft is like what? Around 2 weeks.
24 days. 2 weeks away. 2 weeks away.
Woo. 24 days. All right, Cyn. Well, I will talk to you soon. You're the best. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.